Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Saka, we hear you.
Thank you, Sarah. We are trying to test the speaker in the hall here. Hello, Mr. Ade, can you hear me? Are you there?
Saka is loud and clear from here. Saka.
Hello? Hello? I can't hear you. Hello, I'm talking. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me now? Hello? Is your phone connected? Hello? Yes, I can hear you, but there's echo. Hello, hello. Okay, I will keep saying hello, 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 hello. Yes, the echo is going gradually. Hello, 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 hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello. If you can hear me now, I think it's better. Hello? Hello? The echo is coming back again. Are we sure everybody in the hall?
Saka, have them try with you speaking and the United Nations account muted. Let's try that.
Pardon?
Can we try with Saka speaking and the UN account muted?
Yes, you know, we are in separate places. They are
Yeah, keep
inside the
talking,
hall.
Saka.
Me, I'm outside.
Yeah, like this is better. We do not hear an echo when the United Nations account is muted and Saka is not muted. So when the speaker online is unmuted, the UN account needs to be muted.
So is there any echo now?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
How about in the hall?
Sorry, Sarah. I assume maybe there are connections in the hall. That's why you have the echo.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So you are making sure that everybody is on mute inside the hall. Yes, from my side, I think everything is fine. There is echo inside that hall. Maybe some people connected. Everybody inside the hall, let's make sure they are not connected. Let's disconnect them. I think it's better because there's no need for them to connect. Yes, I can hear you now. Can you also hear me? Hello?
Online, we hear both you, Saka, and the UN account, but not the UN account right now.
But we need to get on with the meeting. So I'm going to invite the moderator, my sister and my colleague, Jane Bevan, who's the Chief of WASH at UNICEF. Please, colleagues, put your hands together and welcome Jane to the panel. And to join her on the stage will be Inyo Bong, from the Director of the Department of Climate Change, Federal Ministry of Environment. I'm going to invite Uche from the Federal Ministry of Education. Uche Onwama, please come forward. Peter, who is the Director of Environmental Sciences and Technology, Federal Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation. Mayowa Aleshen, who is the Director of Teacher Development at UBAC. And Romanus Odu, who is the Director of Literacy Programs at NMEC. Colleagues, if you can please come forward and join us. Jane is eagerly awaiting your presence. Jane, lovely to have you, and over to you.
Thank you so much, and it's a real pleasure to be here. Just to recap, my name is Dr. Jane Bevan. I'm the Chief of WASH at UNICEF. WASH stands for Water, Sanitation and Hygiene. Obviously, climate change is intricately related to all aspects of life, but I think WASH probably more than ever, because we're talking about increased extremes of weather and increased flooding, increased droughts, all of which do affect the water situation in the country, and hence the provision of basic infrastructure in places like schools, which is what we're talking about today. And I know that there is a fantastic infrastructure in this country. I have to say I was very inspired by some of the talks, particularly the eco-warriors in the schools this morning. And I think, as Sadhana rightly said, what we really need to look at now is the higher level systemic changes that can be made in the Nigerian system to really address some of these issues, because there can be all of these small-scale activities and actions, but we need higher level policies and strategies to really bring all these together and make them nationwide. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome all of my panelists. Thank you very much for joining me. They're nearly all directors, I think, so I'm going to call you director. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. No, I will try and use your names. So please, we'll move ahead with the first question. And I think all of these questions that I've been given are kind of angled towards the issues that I mentioned around the kind of broader upstream systemic changes that we can make around climate change and links with education. Now, I'm first going to start with a couple of quotes. There is a national climate change policy for Nigeria, and one of the quotes I'm going to read is that in this policy, we are going to ensure harmonization of sectoral regulations to align with the proposed Climate Change Act and their implementation. And secondly, we plan to strengthen the capacity of the educational system to provide pertinent climate education and research. So I would like to pose this first question to Director Awe. Director Awe is... is not here. Okay, so I'm going to ask instead, please, Lydia Gigina. This is your, okay, Uche, I beg your pardon. Representing Director Gigina, would you like to respond to what actions should the education sector take to achieve some of these policy objectives?
Thank you very much for this question and for inviting us. First of all, I would like to start with this. We all know that Federal Ministry of Education is the policy-making body and regulator of the education sector in Nigeria. And secondly, to answer your question, we want to start again with what education has been doing, or what the Federal Ministry has been doing as a regulator and policymaker. First, we have been working with several MDAs on climate change. We work with the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, under which NEMA is. And then the NEMA is in charge of disaster issues in Nigeria. And we work with them currently on the predictions from NIMET. NIMET predicted a lot of things, floods, a lot of things in Nigeria, and we met, several agencies met together to go through their predictions and then give directions on the aspects of Nigeria that will be affected, the economy, the water resources, the food, and all that. And we also gave prepared suggestions on how to mitigate the effects of climate change. So that's one collaboration we're doing. Then secondly, we work with the environment on UNFCCC, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, to prepare for the COPs. And then we also work with them to prepare the National Action Plan on climate change. We'll work with Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Health, Agriculture on different areas like WASH, and then tree planting, erosion control, desertification, and all that. And we work with NGOs, UNICEF, to deliver to produce policies, to intervene in several areas, especially in the education emergency. And they are one of the leaders of the Education Emergency Working Group. So together we collaborate on this climate change aspect. And then secondly, the ministry conducts annual capacity building on education, for teachers, on education emergency preparedness and response. We started with Unity Schools, Federal Unity Schools, which is the ministry's direct, since education is on concurrent lists. So we start with them and we cascade it to the state. For now, we have gone around 4 zones. We have the south, remaining the north central and the southeast zones for us to work to prepare the teachers for education in emergency preparedness and response. Again, the curriculum, the NERDC is under education. So they update the curriculum regularly on climate change actions, climate change activities, disaster risk reduction. So some of our subjects, like social science, basic education, and all that, they all have DRR, disaster risk reduction, and climate change education embedded in the subjects. But we have an issue now. Those are things we have been doing. So we are proposing now that the teachers, on the strengthening capacity aspect of your question, we need to train teachers. Many teachers don't know, yes, it is the subject. It's a sentence or this or this or that, a few things there in the curriculum. But we really do need to train the teachers to handle these subjects. And then we need to infuse the climate change and DRL that we proposed to do that on the current clubs existing in schools. We propose also to develop a national policy on climate change and DRR, and then sensitize the public on proper waste disposal and recycling. My colleague mentioned recycling. Yes, most of us reuse. We don't know how to recycle. So we need education on that. And then we need to do environment, we want to propose that schools do regular mapping of the environment, environmental assessment. If we start it in schools, our children will cascade it to their homes and on the community. So we'll know how to watch out for what is wrong, what is happening in our environment. Our land used to be like this, why is it going down? We check out whatever the problem is, and we'll try to solve it immediately. Let's say before the floods come or before any problem comes. And then we want to sensitize on proper waste disposal. We just throw it there or in the gutters. We need to learn. We need to teach our children to do it right, and from them they get home. Let me stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those points. I think all really important. It's fantastic to hear about the strong collaboration, and particularly about the training for the teachers and the cascading of the training. And I'm quite sure that the education support services will be having strong indicators in place, not only to say that the trainings took place, but also how effective they have been in terms of changing the situation in schools, such as you say, for example, waste disposal and collection. So that's fantastic. Thank you very much for the answer. So I'd like to move to the second question now, and for this I'd like to speak to Director Mayowa and Romanus Odo. Thank you. So your agencies, UBEC and NMEC, are working to ensure that all children have access to basic education. So in light of what's just been mentioned, what else is needed? What other things do we need to do to ensure that children, particularly all of the out-of-school children, so children with disabilities, Al-Majiri children, other marginalized groups, for them to be supported in the face of climate change disasters? You have a mic there?
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that a lot of things have been said about issue of climate change, especially pertaining to teachers. For me, I think aside from what we have been doing, like UBEC and the other agencies, more effort should now be put on the teachers to give them skills and knowledge on how to combat the issue of climate change. We need skills. Somebody mentioned that a lot of teachers are not even aware of this issue of climate change. So how do you now want to help? Whether it's in the Al-Majiri or the disadvantaged children, how do you want to help them if you don't have the skills? So I also believe that we need to put more emphasis, apart from the training of teachers, we need to put more emphasis on these extracurricular activities that can help the learners themselves, because that's when they will be able to practice it, and it's like you're catching them young so that they live up to it. When they grow up, they can also teach more people. And when you catch the learners, you're also catching the parents, because they're also going to do that. For us also at the Universal Basic Education Commission, one of our functions is to provide instructional materials. I think more sensitizations can be done by providing charts, by providing posters, and even storybooks. Somebody said it earlier. Storybooks, children can lay hands on that. That's particularly focus on issues of climate change. And that will help. And then we also provide classrooms. We need classrooms that are adaptable now, that can help us. We're talking about heat waves, so we'll need to consider the ventilation and how we can reduce overcrowded classroom, and also a design in schools, drainages, landscaping, planting trees. So all this we need to look at. It will help us. Because if there are drainages, we then reduce or eradicate flooding. And I also believe that we, as government agencies, we also need to, especially at the state level, need to look at how we can quickly respond. We're talking about flooding, or during the rainy season, rains are dripping into the classroom. If these are reported and they are tackled immediately, then we will have reduced or even eradicated issue of rain or water in the classroom that can affect or disrupt classes. So as policymakers, we also need to look at that. And thank you very much.
Good afternoon, all. A lot has been said. Me coming from the non-formal education sector, I have non-formal education teaching and learning materials already developed. We have the curriculum on non-formal education for out of school children. We have the primers, the facilitators module. For there to be sustainability in the face of this climate change, these materials need to be reviewed to infuse this issue, these emerging issues on climate changes into it. Like the curriculum, we need to revisit it and review it and include some issues on climate change. The teacher's module and manual also need to be reviewed to include the issues on climate change. Then coming to the digital aspect of it, MEC is focused on use of literacy by radio to reach the affected people who have been affected on this climate change issue. But I think we should go beyond that. We should explore other digital means, like the use of the handset or the use of the computers. And coming to the advocacy and sensitization level, our advocacy materials also need to be reviewed to capture issues of climate change, like our stickers, our posters that we use to advocate in these vulnerable communities need to capture issues on climate change. And we need to mount vigorous advocacy in the vulnerable communities for us to get their buy-in. Because the moment the community buy in and accept ownership of all these programs, I think the issue of sustainability will be of a minimal thing. And above all, we should devise a measure for effective coordination among the agencies, the MDAs and the organizations working on climate change. Because I have had a lot of experience on all these UNICEF programs. We'll be working on GAP3 program, the issue of coordination between you, the other agencies, the other NGOs working in the same area is always an issue. If we really want sustainability, we need a measure, a stringent measure for coordination among the MDAs and the agencies working on it. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I think just to recap, it's clear that we need to do more. It's clear that we need to coordinate and sensitize people more. But I think there still remains concern about the out-of-school children. But I like your idea about the radio to get more information across, and we need to focus on that as well. But I think perhaps we still need some more solutions for how to reach the out-of-school children, particularly around the issues of climate change.
We use radio to teach. Lessons are scripted. One radio teacher will be able to reach thousands. Even those that are running from flood. Once you have your radio set, once it's the time, you pick out your radio, you listen to the lesson. And in scripting it, we have to infuse the climate change issues, so that when the lesson is going on, they also learn things about climate change. And the learning needs of people affected on this climate change issue should also be infused on the radio lessons.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Romanes. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question now. And this is more around financing for climate change. So I'm particularly going to ask... I just want to mention that President Buhari recently joined the Global Partnership for Education Heads of State call to action to really call for increased domestic education expenditure. And so hopefully this is a strong commitment of the Nigerian government. But in the face of climate change, obviously there are so many priorities, and we have to really consider how best these funds can be used. So what I'd like to ask you, Mr. Sorry, I've got the names all mixed up here. It's Mr. Peter Ekwiozo. I'd like to ask you, in terms of the environment and the climate issues, how do you think that climate change will impact the way that resources are currently distributed for the formal and non-formal basic education?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to actually make some preambular statements that will give a background to your question before I answer your question directly. We have all witnessed the impacts of climate change in form of flooding, in form of desertification, in form of soil erosion, in form of heat waves, and currently going on right now in form of storms and all of that. For Nigeria, for us in Nigeria, the government has raised the level of consciousness to another level. First, we put in place the institutional and policy frameworks. It took a process to get to that, right from 2009, elevating climate change unit to climate change department, and then coming up with NAMAS, coming up with all various adaptation strategies, then the policy, which also came up with policy response approaches across sectors. For the Federal Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, our role in all these across sectors is pivotal, is very key. And over the years, we have been planning to undertake comprehensive technology needs assessment for climate change mitigation and adaptation in Nigeria. And in November 2020, we actually started the process. But what the policy has done by looking at science, technology, and innovation research and trying to mainstream that into core activities of the ministries, we came up with, we were able to now relate with technical partners, donor agencies, and we have all come together and we commenced the technology needs assessment for climate change mitigation and adaptation, starting with agriculture, energy, and industry. Today, we have covered 6 sectors. And in the coming weeks, the Federal Executive Council will be approving the National Technology Action Plan. Now, what that does to finance is that the National Technology Action Plan gives researchers, policymakers, academia, it gives us the direction to actually catch into the global climate finance, which is a huge resource for Nigeria as a country because of our population. And all of you gathered here will recall that hitherto before this time, if you go across all our donors, UNICEF, UNIDO, GCF, JEF, you will see that the penetration of access to finance is low. But with this roadmap that we are trying to put in place, access to finance will be, and that of course will impact on education.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So we can look forward to zero emission schools, all on solar?
Yes, we are also, yes, apart from prioritizing all these technologies across sectors, from agriculture to industry to energy, Okay? We have also looked at achieving Nigeria's long-term vision, which is net zero by 2060. And we have come up with technologies that actually can accelerate that pace, like methanol fuel technology. So we'll be transiting in the next few months to hydrogen fuel cells for providing electricity in Nigeria.
Excellent. We look forward to seeing the action plan. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Director.
Thank you.
If I could ask the same question to Mrs. Uche, just about the resources and their distribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On the resources, all I can say is that, yes, they are distributed as it currently, the way it's distributed currently in Nigeria. It's not even enough for us to do education. And now climate change has come with a lot of costs added. So, for instance, in the curriculum development, it needs a lot of money. In teacher training, we need a lot of money. And manpower, of course. And then planting of trees, maintaining them, provision of green energy, solar energy, alternative, whatever, making us live better lives, protection from floods or prevention of floods. All these need money. And as the money is distributed currently, it's not enough, and we need more. From wherever it has come, we need more. Thank you.
That's a great answer. I think every sector would say the same, that we always need more funds. But thank you for that. So I'm going to move on to the next question now. Just more about the learning around climate change. So I know that, and I'm going to ask you again, Director Peter, the National Climate Change Policy envisions the integration of climate science research into the national education system. So how has this been done so far? What are the outcomes, and what are the gaps that we still need to fill?
In terms of outcomes, following what I have just explained, that we have put in place a National Technology Action Plan that will soon be deposited with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. That will help researchers, that will help investors to access climate finance. Major outcome from all these efforts, sizing the role of science, technology, innovation, R&D, we have actually developed within the platform of interministerial climate change, headed by Federal Minister of Environment. We resolved in that committee that all key MDAs should establish a climate change desk. In my ministry, we have a climate change desk that coordinates research efforts in all the 17 agencies of the ministry. And they meet from time to time to reprioritize and refocus their research. In terms of gaps still exist. There are gaps in implementation framework, getting a focused implementation mechanism that will reduce duplication of efforts among MDAs and even in the private sector. And also fostering an implementation framework that will promote synergy, in which case some agencies can share resources by way of equipment, by way of even funds, and then not to duplicate efforts and be working on the same thing. So huge gap still exists in that. But we hope, we are very optimistic in the ministry that by the time we put in place all these policy frameworks and it creates the necessary desks and then reach out to key institutions, we will be able to minimize waste by deployment of technology, even in terms of soft technologies like climate information. Yeah, effective use of climate information and deploying that and actually carrying out an informal science learning, learning by doing. It will actually go a long way to close all the gaps.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited about some of the plans that you have. If I could ask the same question to Director Mayowa, just about how far you feel the education has come so far and what gaps you feel are still remaining.
Thank you very much. I think we've all said here or agreed that a lot has also been done in education. But having said that a lot has been done, we still have also very, very wide gap that we still need to fill. We've talked about the fact that even in schools, there are efforts going on, just like the earlier discussion, there was a teacher here that said what they do in their schools, having clubs and all that. Even the learners also attested to that. But you know that it's already been infused in the curriculum, but what we have in the curriculum maybe is just a very, very minute part of it. So, and you know, every day this climate change issue also evolves. So there are a lot of new things even coming in. So the curriculum that we have developed, despite the fact that we have infused a little into it, we need to also review the curriculum. And you talked about the National Climate Change Policy. I'm sure that a lot of people are not even aware of the policy. So we need also to do a lot of advocacy and sensitization. People need to know. If I ask here, how many people have even seen the policy or have heard about it, you'll be amazed at the number of people. So that also needs to...
Can we have a quick show of hands in the room? 1, 2, okay. Maybe a handful, but you're right.
So, you see? So that's one thing we also need to do. We need to do advocacy. We need to do sensitization. Our teachers that we eventually handle the curriculum, they need to be aware. Even the policymakers, they need to be aware. So that's, those are the gaps that we need to fill in the education sector so that we can actually achieve our aims. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think you're absolutely right that it's not enough to develop policies. They really need disseminating and sharing around if they're going to be effective and useful. Very good point. So I'm coming to my last question now, and then we'll move to questions from the audience. So please get your questions ready online as well as in the room. And my last question is more about local community systems. And we have seen in the earlier session that there's many local actors, NGOs, school teachers, individuals that are really working hard to try and do their bit about climate change. But we know that it's not enough. So I'd really like to ask Mrs. Uche again, how can federal ministries, departments and agencies work with each other and with local organizations on the ground to really implement effective, relevant programs and to monitor progress?
Thank you once again. We have a suggestion. We would like all MDAs relevant or working in climate change to have dedicated units or appoint climate change officers who meet regularly together, discuss their activities of their different MDAs, and then plan on how to mitigate from their different sectors. That's one. And then secondly, on the out-of-school children, I mentioned the way they'll have access to climate change education. Yes, I believe that these out-of-school children are either in camps or wherever, but we have education emergency curriculum, and we try to ensure that education continues wherever they are. So since we have this curriculum, EIE curriculum, which also has DRR and CCA subjects embedded. We believe that somehow the training will get to them. And finally, we believe that when you train the teacher, you train the children. The children take it to their homes, down to the community. So we really do need teachers training. That's all for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that response. And if I could ask the same question to you. Sorry.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. I beg your pardon. It was about how we can work together at the national level in your directorates with local NGOs and activists on the ground to really come together to make climate change resistance
How many
happen.
children? Okay. Okay. Already in non-formal, we have a coalition of non-governmental organizations called NOGAS, Non-Governmental Association on Literacy Support Services. And we synergize very well. We have been working very well with them. And of other NGOs that are also collaborating with the Commission. And we develop the curriculum. It will be passed over to them. They will also adopt the curriculum we have developed on climate change and the reading materials and even the follow-up reading materials that we are going to develop. They will also adopt it. We have been working in synergy with all these agencies.
Thank you so much. Would you like to add on that?
Yes, thank you very much. I also wanted to say that the local NGOs can work, in the area of monitoring. Once these things are implemented, the NGOs can come in like an independent monitors to help us assess or evaluate where we are and to also gather evidence whether we're actually doing the right thing and where we are in the implementation. So I think that can be some collaboration between the NGOs and the federal agencies.
That's an excellent suggestion. Would you like to add?
Yes. A number of NGOs have come to me telling me that their problem, why they cannot deliver on their key mandates, is because of fund. But I have always said to anybody that mentions fund as a problem, I said fund should be the fourth place in terms of priority. Do you have your concepts right? Have you developed an articulated plan? Now, have you come with your strategies, which is a bankable plan? Then fund comes in at that point. So my advice is that we need to deploy appropriate technology, strengthen existing platforms. There are existing platforms, like I mentioned, the Interministerial Committee on Climate Change. This is existing. We also have a donor platform where we meet with UNIDO, Jeff, and all of that. Is to strengthen these platforms and deploy appropriate technology to reduce gap in communication. Because what you think you are doing in Kano, another person may be duplicating the same effort in the same Kano. So if we deploy appropriate technology, it may be creating platforms, it may be creating a means of communication, and you know that what you want to do, you can get it easily by relating with your colleague. That will reduce waste, especially in financial resources, and also manpower. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think we've heard from all the panelists on that last question. I think a big round of applause for them. Thank you all for taking part in the panel. It's been, I think, really interesting for us. And I think now we've turned to the time. I hope somebody's running around with a microphone, where we ask questions from the floor. There's a hand at the back of the room there. The gentleman in blue at the back.
Yeah. Okay. The director, will you allow me to start with the children?
Oh,
'Cause,
okay.
They want to.
Let's start with the children.
Okay.
Okay, good day, everyone. I actually have two questions, then a suggestion too. So now the question is, we're fighting industrial companies from producing waste. So I've not been hearing news about NGOs and government agencies suing these industries. They just keep depositing their waste in the ocean. Secondly, I've noticed in parts of this country and other African countries, unlike the videos I've seen abroad, they have different type of waste bins. They have the recyclables, the breakables, and just the waste. And we don't see this in Nigeria. And another thing too, the drainage this man was talking about is not only the problem. Most government schools, their roofs are made by zinc. And when rain falls, the zinc begins to rust, plus the heat of the sun, causing thermal expansivity. So it creates holes. So the water drips into the schools, just like our school hall. The water drips. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very practical question.
Okay. Oh, a girl this
Shall
time.
we take several questions first?
So I've been hearing everyone actually saying about climate change based on education. My question here is that you said that you visited a lot of schools in FCT, right? And maybe in Nigeria. Please, how many schools exactly? Because I, as a student, want to see the changes. And I believe my school is one of the most popular government schools in Nigeria or in FCT. And like who says 1-3 to the but yet I don't see like changes in all. You say you visit different schools, talk about it, you know, sensitize and stuff, but I haven't seen it happening in our school. Why is our school not like, apart from today, if not I came for it today, I wouldn't even know about this. So, and I haven't heard my friends from other schools also telling me that, okay, some people came to sensitize them and this is what they told them. Government secondary school to Dunwada, who says on for Abuja.
Aisha is our star girl.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, the panelists. You've done a good job. And we are also doing a good job of participating. Now, to me, it's just a comment that the panelists and all of us can take away from. This climate change issue should be a cultural thing. We need to have a cultural shift in Nigeria for us to be able to appreciate and imbibe what it means to have a real educated society that will really practice the tenets that we are trying to put forward. It's not just like my students just said now. It's not just a matter of hit and run, coming to some set of pupils or people in a certain setting. But for us as Nigerians to have a general cultural shift in the way we relate, in the way we think, in the way we practice our living, it's meant to be a lifelong thing from the home. To have parents know the value of taking care of the environment from the waste we generate. So who is there to us to now teach the parents? That is where we look at ourselves as educators, the NGOs, the schools, the partners we have. We also have a National Orientation Agency, I don't know whether they are here, to drum it in so that from home, the child learns how to take care of the environment. Then the school comes in, we have the curriculum. We can always update the curriculum because that is the practice, so that we can take care and then take care of emergent issues. But then if the child has the basic foundation, the parents are well informed, it will help to bring up those things, those tenets in the child. So now coming to the school, we have the different people that we have identified, different people that will teach the child. The teachers need to be trained. Students need to have it in their curriculum. And then we have the NGOs. We have the school-based management committees that also help support what is happening in the environment. And we have the NGOs to help us, because we know that we have a lot of children in school, but we still have some of them out of school. How do we capture, we cannot use curriculum to teach children that are not in school. So how do we pass the message across to them? To help them by the NGOs, the communities, and the rest of them, to help put these messages across, because you work in the grassroots. You are the one that have a direct relationship, the community leaders, the gatekeepers, and the rest of them. We can have a way of interacting with them so that they can imbibe what we are trying to pass across. And of course, the older adults. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I think there's some important questions there. Maybe we can just ask the panel to respond before we take any more. And I want to add one more question, which came online, which is about the awareness of the policy that was mentioned earlier. What strategies can we adopt to really disseminate climate change policy so that everybody knows about it? Over to you. Yeah. Anybody who wants to answer, but please go ahead, Darren.
It actually comes to utilizing appropriate technology. My colleague in his discussion mentioned they use radio to reach out. In some climes, radio may not be more appropriate. It may be television, okay? Whereas in other climes, all these may not be available. It will be person-to-person interaction, in which case you need to deploy the services of the CBOs and NGOs to go to communities. We also have in our ministry a program called Informal Science Learning. Informal Science Learning, we have experts that go to remote areas and reach out to children that are out of school and use science to actually change their attitude in terms of culture to what they have, and then how they can use common knowledge to do what they're doing.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so
I
much.
think appropriate technology is the way to go, whether by radio, whether by person-to-person interaction, but communication is the way to go.
Communication. And perhaps, Director, you could just answer on the children's question,
Yes,
particularly about who is regulating things like waste and companies that dump stuff.
Well, for the climate change policy, I was raising my hands earlier in the earlier discussion. I believe that the radio is also very, very important, and going to the communities. Apart from selling the message, we also need to mention to them that there's a national policy on climate change. So using the radio, having drama programs, talk programs on the radio will go a very long way, and it will go into the hinterlands. So that's on sensitization, on creating awareness on the national policy. For the issue of the zinc, I think I mentioned earlier that one of the functions of UBEC, one of the services we provide, is provision of classrooms. And I said, now we have been providing classrooms. With the issue of the climate change, we need to now start looking at infrastructure that are adaptable to climate change. So we need to look at whatever they're using in building the classrooms that will help mitigate the problem of climate change. So one of the things is what you have said. Instead of using the corrugated iron sheet, we need to look at roofing system that will encourage mitigation of climate change issues. So if it's the door panes or window panes or whatever they're using, it must also something that will encourage this promotion of climate change issues. For the dustbins, I've seen it also outside. I've seen it on CTV, but I think for Nigeria, the Ministry of Health is the one to propagate that. maybe our level has not really got into that, because if one we are even having, we're not making use of it. But I believe starting now with the advocacy we are talking about, sensitization, bringing it to schools, will start coming up to the level of having this different, or this segmenting our waste, having the one that is disposable, the one that we can reuse.
Recycling.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Romanes?
On the issue of reaching out, just as my colleague said, communication. There are many ways to communicate these issues to people. It can be through advocacy tools like posters, written in different languages. Can read, can also talk to those who cannot read. We have one strategy in EMEC. Each one teach one, or fund the teaching of one. For those who understand the issue of the climate change, should be able to reach out to those who have not gotten the knowledge of the climate change.
Thank you very much. I think we've had some really useful points. I think we have one very last time for very last question. The gentleman in blue had his hand up right at the very beginning. Can somebody take the mic across to him, please? And then I'm afraid we have to wrap up because we're running out of time.
Wow. So who? All right.
Very briefly, please.
My name is Dr. Okoye Celestine from Federal Ministry of Education, Abuja. I'm representing the Director, Technology and Science Education. My question is, first of all, I want to sincerely thank all the contributors, especially from the Ministry of Science and Tech, Environment, and other ones. My question is, all of us are witnesses to the recent flood disaster that ravaged many states in Nigeria. From your presentations, the director from Science and Tech keep on telling us about appropriate application of appropriate technology. So my question is there any plan in place to ensure that such disaster is checkmated? Thank you.
Who would like to respond to that? Can we stop the flooding?
Thank you very much for that question. Yes, there is appropriate technology for anything. I have been negotiating for technology development and transfer under United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change since 2008. And what developed country parties do tell us, especially US, is that why are you asking us to give you technology to develop when the world of technology is free? Not all technologies are patented. Some of them, their patents have expired. So you are free to use it. So the UN Secretary has been preaching deployment of appropriate technology by developing countries. Coming to your question, flooding. We had interministerial committee meeting before the 2012 flood. And we met and we came up with measures. They told us that very soon the dam in Cameroon will be released. And we came up with appropriate mitigative measures. For instance, I supervise the National Space and Development Agency, that's NASA. We have satellites, real time, that can tell you that water, source of that water, speed of that water, time that water will get to Bauchi, the time it will get to, and all of that. And also, the same satellite technology using GeoPia will tell you exactly a particular point that you can cite a dike. You can cite dikes to capture the water and reduce the speed, and therefore reduce the vulnerability of that flooding. So all these are in place. There's no solution that is beyond human beings if you think right and act right.
I love
Thank
your
you.
optimism. Thank you so much. So I'm afraid we have to wrap it up there. I know that there are many more questions, and that all of the panel will still be here, and you're welcome to approach them individually, I'm sure. But I want to thank all of the panel very much for sharing with everybody. I think my key takeaways are that we need greater coordination, we need greater dissemination of all of the policies and strategies that exist, and we need more appropriate technology. And we're heading towards carbon neutral schools. Thank you very much for everybody.
Thanks a million, Jane, and thank you to our panelists. And, you know, this is the leadership in climate change in Nigeria, so we will be looking to them to find these good solutions and make sure they spread across the country. We're about coming to lunch, but I know you've got some energy to give them a big, big round of applause. Thanks a million. I'm going to ask my next speaker to start making her way to the stage. Couple of key things that came out of the session. We need a cultural shift in thinking on climate, a whole of society approach. We have a policy, but nobody knows about it. So we really need to increase the awareness on it. We know how to reuse, but we don't know how to recycle, and that's the challenge to all of us. Some issues around the infrastructure in schools, that we need adaptable classrooms. So those who are constructing our classrooms need to make sure that they are climate resilient. We need better drainage and landscaping in schools. We've got a curriculum, but the curriculum needs to be significantly strengthened and to be able to respond to how climate change who is from the Women Environmental Group. She will speak about climate change and children's rights.
Everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here representing Dr. Priscilla Achakwa, who is the founder of a Women Environmental Program. And I'm also excited to see my big brother Mike and Olumide also working in this climate change space. And I must say I'm proud of these students. They actually know what climate change is and how it's impacting them. You can see how they are throwing questions, and I just want to encourage you to do more. When you speak, people know your issues and they know how to address it. So I'm going to be very fast. Next slide, yeah. So
parents to carry some of their belongings, and they don't even have anywhere to go. They're just facing different directions. There are some that are going this way, some are going this way. You don't even know where they are going to, but all they are seeking for shelter. Next, please. So when we talk about climate change, what is it? But I know that most of us know what it is. But it simply refers to a long-term shift in temperature and weather patterns. That's a simple definition of climate change. And this happens because of some natural causes and human. Being taken, but actually some actions are taken, but it delays a bit because we don't have systems that works fast for you to see that what they have caused to the environment. And I will assure you that NGOs are working, and there's a very big NGO. Okay, next. No. Yeah. Yes. So we've heard about awareness creation. We have heard about planting of trees and using stories to take to tell the using art to tell the story of climate change. Before I started this presentation, my brother showed me a video. I was telling him that I wish I had access to that video earlier. I would have shown you how a young boy is telling his story of climate change through art. they are very talented kids that can be used to tell the story of climate change. Like someone was saying, it's not everybody that understands the story about climate change. But we have to use different ways to create this awareness. We need pictures, we need stories, we need poems, we need music. Someone contacted me from Ghana about a song he composed about climate change. There are different ways that we can use students to tell the climate change story that people will understand and how it's impacting them. And in doing that, the message will get to people that are supposed to take action to address issues of climate change. Now, talking about what we have heard here and how to provide solutions, I just wanted us to have a background of what climate change is and how it's impacting our children and our relatives. Even for us that don't have children, yes, it's impacting. Access to this book. They even have how you can run a climate change club in this book. It's something that every school should have to strengthen the capacity of the teachers and the students in different schools, while we also look for other avenues to see how teachers can be strengthened in the area of climate change. And just to add that, we have a lot of what is lacking is implementation. So when I was asked to talk about policy, I know we have a lot of policy. If it's policies, we're very good at developing policies. But what is lacking in our policy is implementation and collaboration. Everybody is important when it comes to the issue of climate change. If you look at the SDG, climate change is under SDG. Environment to learn. So, and then goal 17 talks about partnership, which means that partnership for the goals. For us to achieve SDGs, we need to involve everybody. Everybody has something to contribute. And some people were talking about collaboration here. I heard they were calling NGOs a lot. Yes, NGOs were open to partnership and collaboration, but most times we don't receive that kind of welcome when we approach ministries. I'm sorry to say it, but it's something that we have experienced a lot. So sometimes you're even discouraged because you write to a school, they tell you that you need to write to this board, you need to write here, and we have timelines to work. If you don't implement according to your timeline, you will return your money to donors. So in as much as we are talking about partnership, we should be open to that partnership. We cannot partner with you when you don't welcome us, when you delay our timelines. Bureaucracy is too much in government institutions. So it's something that we need to take into account. And I also propose that we should have a National Climate Change Day. where we can celebrate our children, where they can come to tell us stories about climate change. They know what climate change is. They know how to tell their stories. As we celebrate other days in schools, let's also have a National Climate Change Day where our students can come and talk about issues of climate change. We have a Science and Technology Day where people come with beautiful ideas to compete with other students. Let's have something like this to keep this going, because it's a conversation that we don't need to stop, because the climate is changing and we need to deliberately take actions to ensure that these issues are addressed. Then I know that the Department of Climate Change has the mandate of implementing and coordinating school programs. The Department of Climate Change is under the Ministry of Environment. It's unfortunate that they were not able to be on the panel, but it's their own mandate. So the Ministry of Education also has the responsibility to educate children. So like I said earlier on, it's something that we need continuous collaboration. So it's not something that one ministry will stand alone to do. We need to work together, as I earlier said. So I'm going to stop here, and if I have questions, I will answer. If you have any contribution from the floor, you will also make your own contribution. I hope I'll be able to talk a bit of what has happened and how we are going to address this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good. I think she deserves more. I'm sure Dr. Priscilla Chapa will be very happy to have sent you here to represent her. Please, can we clap for her again? And the young people are moving, and we're very proud of you.
Thank you.
Yes, Sadna. Yes.
Thank you very much, for a wonderful presentation. We're now moving on to the next session, and you will have an opportunity to interact with her over lunch, etc. So thanks a million. We're now moving to the last session. We're running slightly behind. So since my UN colleagues are my sisters and brothers, I can ask them to keep the session tight. I want to invite Tubo, my sister from the UN Resident Coordinator's Office. She has been working very closely with us in coordinating this event, and she will serve as the moderator. And in the session, we will have UNICEF making a presentation, UNDP, and UNESCO. So please give a warm welcome to the stage to Tubo.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I was going to say good afternoon, colleagues, because we're used to saying colleagues. So good afternoon, everyone. It's been a very insightful conversation going forward. A lot has been said, and one of the key things that jumps out is the need for collaboration. It's been highlighted and how we streamline these things. So my job here is very simple. First of all, just to highlight some of the work that the UN has been doing around the area of climate change. For the UN, we have what we call the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. It is the framework with which we highlight the key areas of action that the UN will be collaboratively implementing for a 5-year period. And I just want to highlight that climate change is prioritized in this framework. It's on our strategic pillar 2, the pillar for the planet, where we look at environmental protection and climate change. And then we have other sub-outcomes within that, where we address things like food security and nutrition, sustainable natural resources, energy, and then the climate education. Now, different UN agencies are implementing programs across these different areas, including migration. But today, we are highlighting the work that the UN is doing around climate change and education. And it's beautiful because we're not only looking at, how we build on climate literacy. We're also looking at how climate change affects learners, which is chief of some of the discussions that have been happening here. So without much ado, I want to invite my colleagues from UNESCO, UNDP, to join me in the stage. And then there's our UNICEF colleague as well, Sarah. She'll be joining online. So if I can have Dr. Moma Enang and Ms. Ololade to just come to the podium here. The first presentation will be from Sarah. Sarah will be speaking online. And I want to just crave your indulgence to keep your questions until the end of all three presentations, and we'll take them together. So let's try to buy some of the time that we've lost. If Sarah is ready and the tech team are ready, she can have the floor. Sarah, can you hear us? Just allow us a few minutes to just sort the tech things. You know, these things have a mind of their own sometimes. Hi, Sarah, can you hear us? Oh, okay.
Sarah, can you say something? Let's try to see if we can hear you now.
Testing. Test. Alex, can you mute your mic so that I don't hear an echo, please? Great. Okay. I think this is working. So good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you again. Let's move right on. So let's move to slide 16, please, Alex. So we've discussed that Nigeria is ranked as extremely high risk from the impacts of climate change on children's rights. And this includes two key areas. First, it includes climate and environmental shocks. And second, it includes child vulnerability. Next slide, please, Alex, slide 17. So in other words, not only are climate-related disasters very likely to affect Nigeria, but also when they do, communities and especially children are extremely vulnerable because they are exposed to harm and because communities are not adequately supported to adapt. At the same time, systems like education and health are extremely likely to experience interruption or diminished coverage or quality of service. Next slide, please. Slide 18, please, Alex. Thank you. So this means that our task in the education sector is twofold. We've heard about the fact that we need to reduce the vulnerability, we need to strengthen the resilience of children and the education system, such as through crisis and disaster risk reduction, improving physical infrastructure, but we also need nature-based solutions. Next slide, please, Alex, slide 18. So as we've heard, technology is a really important component of this equation, but we also know that that's not enough by itself. To reduce the impacts of flood, for example, to continue to capture carbon, we need land management. We need reforestation, revegetation, especially around schools. And then at the same time, we must equip young people with the knowledge and the skills and opportunities to support a more life-sustaining future. So all of the presenters today have emphasized awareness raising and comprehensive climate change education, but we also need green skills development. We need young people who are ready to take green jobs in agriculture, technology, health, and other related fields. Next slide, please. So to understand this a little bit better, in UNICEF, we reviewed guidance and evidence on climate change education from around the world. And we found that climate education drives positive action when it enables young people to take action. In other words, without viable pathways to affect change, young people feel helpless and hopeless. And we see this in the growing incidence of climate anxiety around the world. So if we apply instead an empowerment model to climate literacy education, we see that young people need foundational understandings of the environment and climate change. They need skills for applying that knowledge to solve real-life challenges. They need the know-how to access reliable resources, and they need the ability to connect what they learn to their daily lives. We've heard from young people, we heard from the young man earlier and the young woman who spoke, that they know what they want, they know what they need in terms of solutions. It is our collective responsibility to connect these young people with opportunities to put this into action. Next slide, please. So far, UNICEF has used this empowerment-focused approach to develop a comprehensive framework for environmental and climate literacy education. And we've then strengthened the awareness and skills on climate change for over 33,000 learners and built the resilience of over 30,000 teachers to respond to emergencies. We've supported 33 states and the FCT to develop costed, emergency responsive education sector plans. And we've also put in place the infrastructure and the support needed for distance learning to make sure that even when disaster does strike, children can continue to learn. And so moving forward, our next steps will focus on expanding the implementation of the minimum standards for safe schools, supporting the development of environmental and climate literacy standards for basic education, and continuing to work with the network of young people and the other UN agencies, other CSOs to launch the Youth Manifesto that you heard at the beginning of today's event. UNICEF is also initiating support for the development of early warning systems for crisis prevention and response that address natural and environmental hazards. And we will continue high-level advocacy and capacity strengthening for public investment in and coordinated action on climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction in education. And I also want to emphasize, earlier Mr. Romanes said, we need content available in multiple formats. Well, UNICEF has put in place the Nigeria Learning Passport, and because of this, we are well positioned to work with other UN agencies and our partners to digitalize climate change education content and disseminate it via the Learning Passport as well as via the radio education programs that UNICEF supports. So we're looking forward to working with other agencies, the Ministry of Education and other ministries at the federal and state level, and with other partners to continue this collaboration. Thank you so much. Over.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you for maximizing the time in spite of the technological challenges. A few highlights, you can see that from our presentation, she highlights something that is a strength of the UN, that is supporting the government and people of Nigeria with technical capacity through system strengthening, developing key frameworks, like the framework for the environment literacy, the early warning systems, and the other things that she has highlighted. So beautifully presented, UNICEF, well done. And you can see that she has also highlighted, some of the things that have been echoed in this room for collaboration and the use of or empowering local actors and young people and students to carry these messages. So without taking much time, I would invite UNDP to go ahead and speak. Yeah.
Hello everyone, my name is Fanny Ololade and I work with Environment Unit. We can call us the Nature, Climate Change and Energy Unit of UNDP Nigeria. So I'm just going to give a brief outline of what we do and who we are and what we represent as a unit. So you can see we are highlighted in this slide. We're the Environment Unit, and what we do is to respond to the growing threat of climate change. We mainstream environmental concerns into national development planning and processes, and we expand access to environmental and energy services. So these are our thematic areas. We work with climate change adaptation and mitigation. We work with pollution control. We work with chemical control. We work with ecosystem, policy interventions, and institutional support to the government. We work with, usually we work with Federal Ministry of Environment on most of our projects, and we also work with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture on most of our projects. So these are our core areas. I'm not going to bore you with most of these stories, but these are the main things we do as a unit. So we adopt and institutionalize policies, and then we have the National Cooling Action Plan that was launched last year by the Federal Ministry of Environment, the National Ozone Office. And we have the institutional support also. We also support the government to achieve most of this. We have the Hazardous Waste Stockholm Convention, which we did last year. I think we had the Stockholm Convention last year. We also emphasize on food security on most of our projects. But we had a core project that I think it was one of the best in Africa last year. That was the food security project. We also have some of this ozone depleting substances refrigeration system that we work with the Ozone Office to monitor and to phase out ozone depleting substances in the coming years. Also, what are the interventions we do? We do the livelihood opportunities, water access, job creation. On our food security project, a lot of jobs were created because what we did mainly was to, we had these female farmers that we trained, and then we improved their source of livelihood, we improved the way they see farming, and then we introduced this climate smart agriculture into their farming processes. So these are the main things we do. And then these are our main projects, our main donors. We have the GEF, Global Environmental Facility. We have about 3 projects under the Global Environmental Facility. The first one is pollution control. We are phasing out PCBs, that's polychlorinated biphenyls. I'll not bore you with that, but those are the things you see in a transformer, your regular transformer in front of your houses. There is a particular oil that is very cancerous and seeps into the groundwater. And so when you drink water, usually, some of these things can be found inside. We did a study where we conducted a study for breastfeeding mothers, and we found out that these substances were even in the breast milk of breastfeeding mothers. That's how far it goes. So we are working on phasing out these chemicals, and then we are going to dechlorinate it, remove the chlorine, and then put it back in the transformer so that it doesn't have any sort of effect in the nearest future. And then these are we have our donors, Government of Italy, we have the MLF, that's the Montreal Protocol, that also donates to our project. Also in the pipeline, we have the Agora project, that's the abating greenhouse gases on RAC. RAC, when I mean RAC, I mean the refrigerant and air conditioning systems. So even our air conditioning systems, even our regular ACs and our regular refrigerators that we think are safe to use, also have some form of harm and can cause cancer to the nearest future, to the health hazards to the nearest future. So looking forward, we want to have a possible collaboration with UNICEF on environment, climate change, and education. That is institutionalizing these things in our schools. If you see most of our schools, this climate change is not embedded into their curriculum. They just teach them as part of it. You're just passing through it, but you're supposed to institutionalize these things. I remember when I was about to go for my postgraduate studies, and I had to look for a school that was doing environmental management. I had to literally search for in Nigeria. Most of these schools don't have it. So I think about 3 schools or 4 schools are the only ones that have this climate change environment. So we need to institutionalize this particular core area of our life, because in the nearest future, it concerns all of us. It concerns us. It concerns everyone. The environment is not just about the UN, it's not just about frameworks. So I'll be rounding up, and then thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, UNDP. Maybe during the question and answer time, you may probably want to highlight, or your colleague here want to highlight some of the work you've done in climate change and education. Which is the theme of this meeting. I know UNDP has developed some significant work on climate change and education. And, there's been a previous collaboration. I remember from our preparation for how we supported the government on COP27, we knew that, UNICEF was able to adapt some of the climate change literacy manuals that UNDP has developed, adapted it to children. So that's one way that UNICEF and UNDP have collaborated pre-COP27 and moving forward. So there will be other places to explore. Without wasting much time, I would pass it on to Dr. Moma.
Thank you very much, Tubo. I want to thank very much UNICEF for considering it very important to involve UNESCO in this program. And also thank you all for being here. My name is Enang Moma. I work with UNESCO. UNESCO is United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. And I would like to do this short presentation. Since I'm the last speaker, I'll have a little bit of time. because the last people always have more. Last children always enjoy a bit. So I'll be talking about climate change and education, and I'll be very fast about it. Next slide. As we have all heard, climate change is everywhere, is everyone's business, it affects everybody, is a priority for all. And UNESCO, what we do, we support member countries. Nigeria is one of our member states, to achieve sustainable development and also build peace. And in so doing, we also support actions on climate change. Because of course, when you support this kind of actions to achieve sustainable development, and we have this climate change action in 5 priority areas: in sciences, in education, in culture, in communication, and in social and human sciences. And of course, we also have what we call the climate change action, which is aimed at making the countries contribute to the nationally determined contributions. And for that, we have 3 core areas: education for sustainable development. We also have monitoring our designated sites, like the biosphere reserves, the cultural sites, and the geoparks. And then we also have protecting the oceans. So under education for sustainable development, the climate change and education is one of our very key areas, key nexus. And so what we have done in that is to adopt what we call the Greening Education Partnership, which is, it's a UN thing, it's a UN mechanism to support countries to be able to have a education that is climate ready. So UNESCO has keyed into this global, Greening Education Partnership, and the secretariat of that partnership sits in UNESCO. So what do we do in Greening Education Partnership? There are 4 key areas: greening schools, which we have all talked about in the session, and in the 3 sessions; greening curriculum; greening teacher education and education capacities; and also greening communities. These are the 4 areas of Greening Education Partnership. And of course, I don't want to go into the details of all this, but like I said, we have all suggested these, and we have all seen that it is good for us to have education, climate embedded in our curriculum. It has to move from the project to the system-wide approach. And so we have to do that. We have to train the teachers. We have to build their capacity. And it's a lifelong learning thing. Somebody mentioned that. And then we have to get the communities also trained, on climate change. So it is then even the children, what are their practices in school? Green the schools. All their activities has to be green, less papers, in school, planting of trees and all that. So all this has to be taken into consideration. Now, this action UNESCO is taking also aligns with the national priorities. For example, in Nigeria, the national priorities is embedded in the National Development Plan of Nigeria. And if you go through it, you will see that there's priority for climate change, of course, in terms of meeting the nationally determined contributions. There's also priorities for education. And these priorities include, reducing out-of-school children, access to basic education, improving quality of higher education, improving quality of teachers, and all that. And of course, if you want to align, you see that the Global Education Partnership aligns very well with all these priorities that is aligned in Nigeria's, in Nigerian development plan. So you see that whatever the UN is doing, I now talk about the UN, is doing must align with and has aligned with Nigerian priorities. So what are the resources that we are using to do this? UNESCO is an intellectual organization of the UN. And so we have resources in terms of providing technical support to the country, providing capacity, and also we have some regular seed funding where we can support activities in Nigeria to look for bigger funds to do implement some system-wide activities. And of course, we partner with our sister agencies. UNICEF is already a partner in the global, in the green education partnership thing. It's already a partner, and then there are other UN agencies that are partnering in this mechanism. So this is the way we work, and we hope to, keep supporting the countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you for keeping to time. Key things that she has highlighted, we can see here, are the collaborative partnerships that exist within the UN and how the UN ensures to align its work with the national priorities. So like when I started earlier, I spoke about the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. To develop that and agree on the 4 strategic priorities, pillars that we have, which environment and climate change is highly prioritized in the pillar 2. We aligned it with the national priorities of the government. We looked at the SDG framework, and then we also looked at the 2030 agenda. So as you can see, all of these things, we make sure that it speaks to the people and the government of Nigeria. And we have continued to try to ensure that all UN agencies that are working in related areas synergize the work that they are doing for greater impact. So we have like a more coherent one UN response. So I'm not sure we have so much time for questions, but I can allow just one very burning question. But if it's not a very burning question, we can move on and thank UNICEF for leading this collaborative process today. Do we agree with that, or there's a very burning question? How burning is it? Okay.
Thank you very much for want of time. I'm from Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria. My name is Ugo Ali Lawrence. I want to thank UNICEF and all the presenters for what they have put out for us. I learned from Sarah Fuller, the presentation that she did, that about 30,000 teachers have been empowered in terms of the knowledge of the climate change issues around the education. And in the teaching and learning environment that we are, teachers are critical. In our database, we have over 2-point-something million teachers in the country, and I think we could do more. In our mandatory continuing professional development programs, we have embedded all of these issues we've been discussing since morning in the programs. And so the question is, how can we work together at the level of Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria to see how we can scale up this particular figure that you mentioned here? And teachers are critical, in the educational environment. Thank you.
Okay, not to speak for UNICEF, but to speak from the perspective of the UN Resident Coordinator's Office. This is one of the answers to that, right? So our role is really to just bring all the agencies together so that, we can really move the needle. So if UNICEF is doing 30,000, UNDP does another 50,000, UNESCO does 100,000, and then other agencies are here, there's IOM, there's different other agencies, we can hit a higher number. So it is that coherent, synergic response. Thank you. And I think we can all exit the stage and give it all back to UNICEF.
Thank you. So the member states asked for one UN response. Let's give it up for the one UN response that we saw here today. Come on, I want to see you clapping. A fantastic job. Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, we're running a little over time, but I'm going to try and close up pretty quickly just to highlight some of the key takeaways and talk of next steps. So some of the things we heard, Sarah presented that Nigeria is at very high risk as evidenced by the Climate Change Risk Index. So we have an emergency and we need to respond. We've heard from the colleagues in the first panel that climate change is not an act of God, it is an act of human beings. And unfortunately, our children who've been leading the charge on climate change are highly anxious about this. And we can do something about it. These are skills that are not tacit. It's not buried somewhere in your body that you know how to do it. It is something that you can learn. And the education system has a responsibility to educate children about this, but also to empower them to take action. We heard from some of the colleagues that we know how to reuse, but we don't know how to recycle. And as a society, everybody else in the world is recycling. We need to catch up onto that train and make sure that it is available in the country. Dr. Falake told us that we need a cultural shift, a whole of society approach, and that everybody is important for climate change. Our climate change activist, Damaris, told us that everybody is important. We've heard in the first panel of today wonderful grassroots projects, but what we actually need to respond at scale and with urgency is a systemic response. We also heard from the climate change expert that we need to plan for emergencies. Disasters are upon us. The climate is shifting. We're going to have fire, flooding, desertification, and the first response can't be to shut down the schools because the schools are then used to house people. We need to plan for these things. We need awareness raising. We have a policy, but there were about 2 people in the room who were aware of the policy. So we need to disseminate and create awareness. We need school committees to plan for disasters. We do have a curriculum, and there are spots of this in the curriculum, but we need a more systemic response. Climate change is evolving, and the curriculum needs to evolve with it. Our teachers need much better training to be able to support children through this. We cannot only focus on the formal schooling system, we also need to focus on children who are out of school. And as much as we take care of the buildings and the infrastructure and making sure we're ready for a disaster and where to go to and what to do, we are the education system, which means that through a natural disaster, we don't know how often these things are going to come. Learning needs to continue. We can't have a generation of children locked out of learning. These are going to become the future climate activists, the future directors who don't have the skills they need to function in society. So we have to focus on continuity of learning. We've got a patchwork of policy, of structures, etc. But again, to respond to the scale that we're experiencing and with urgency, we need a formalized, formidable institutional response that is coherent and that is coordinated. We passed the point of ad hoc. I'm doing this little thing, you doing this little thing, and then we went together in a meeting, we try to patchwork it together. No, we need an institutionalized response now. UNICEF will now look at the inputs that we've received to adjust our own climate change education strategy. I have no doubt the UN will be doing the same, and that we will be working together to make sure there's good curriculum, there's good teacher training, there's an early warning system, and in the lead will be government. So UNICEF, the UN works together with government to support government, and we will work with young people to empower them so that they can take action. So those are some of the key highlights from the meeting. With that, I want to thank the co-hosts of the meeting, UNDP, UNIC, and the RC's office. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We hope to do many more of these together. This is the first of many conversations. There's many more things on climate that we need to talk about. I want to thank the moderators. I want to thank the speakers. A lot of pre-planning happens. Before these events, there've been briefings, submission of documents. So thank you. I want to thank all the young people. They were really fantastic with the questions they asked. They just blew my mind. So thank all the young people online. Let's give them a massive round of applause. These are our leaders. So we are in your hands to make the world better for us, for all of us. I want to thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. I don't think any of the other seminars that we've held have been this well attended. So Jane, we need to do much more on climate because everybody wants to talk about the climate. So thank you for being a fantastic audience. I apologize for the issues with sound, with video, etc. I know all of you were stressed on this side. You can breathe now. And we'll do better next time. I want to come back to what I started with. The next meeting you go to, you've got to bring your own water bottle. You've got to take small actions. When you go to the shop this weekend, think of me. Go with your reusable bag or buy one and never use a plastic bag again. And I'm going to keep challenging our organizations and us as individuals. Are you recycling paper and plastic? Right? You've got to push your organizations and your family. And then ladies, we're a very feminized organization. The men, I think they'll get their heads around this, but ladies, are you ready to use a second-hand dress? Are you ready to go to a shop and buy a dress that has been used by somebody, they loved it and they let it go? And now they've decided they're moving on. Are you prepared to do that? Because that is what climate change is about, right? When you're ready, you know you're on the journey to climate change. Mahatma Gandhi said, to have change in the world, you must be the change. So you must be the change you want to see in the world. So I'm going to ask you the next time we meet, you're going to walk in here with a plastic bottle. You're going to tell me you've used recyclable bags. You're going to recycle paper and plastic in your home and in your workplace. And somebody in the audience, one of the lovely ladies are going to tell me, I've bought a second-hand because I'm on the journey to climate change. Thank you for being a wonderful audience, and lunch is served in the main hall. Azuka, is lunch in the main hall? Okay, so you have to go into the main building to the cafeteria. Okay, we're gonna take a photo. Everybody's very hungry, so I know you're gonna assemble yourselves very quickly. The meeting is now closed, so you can give everybody a round of applause. And if you can just assemble yourselves here quickly. Young people, help us assemble everybody. We're going to take a picture together. Right? Some people up on the top.